On this episode of Locked On Angels, it's report card time, and our everydayers graded the Angel players. And today, we're grading the starting pitching and sharing your thoughts on each pitcher and their season and what you thought about their performance. This should be fun. It's time to get locked on with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcast, including Apple Podcast, Spotify, and SiriusXM by searching Locked On Angels. And if you'd like to get back to the Super Halo Bros for all this Super Halo content, here's some things that you can do. Leave us a rate and a review on Apple Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe and become a Locked On Everydayer. And whether you're watching or listening, come over to YouTube, leave a comment. It's really one of the best ways to get in touch with us and be a part of the conversation. And this episode of Locked On Angels is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah, the right stay can make you a fan of any city. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today.
Thanks for being here for this episode of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Hey, we're here 5 days a week through the offseason, Monday through Friday, talking Angels baseball every single weekday. And of course, we'll do that until about late December or so. We'll go down to 3 episodes a week. But for now, we're here 5 days a week, and we're excited to talk Halos with you. On today's show, we're taking a look at the roster report card you gave for each of the starting pitchers this season. Mike, we've got 12 on deck here for starting pitching. In fact, I thought it would be a great place to start with the guys that we kind of expected to be in the rotation to start 2024. So let's get into it.
Let's start with Tyler Anderson. He received a 2.73 score out of 4 from our Locked On Everydayers. That's a C+. So not showing off, not lagging behind, right? Here's some of the comments that you everydayers said about Tyler Anderson. Great start, bad finish. I think that's a good summary of his season. Should have traded him and pitched a lot. John, thoughts on Tyler Anderson and the grade that our everydayers gave him?
Yeah, I'm going to start with the good. I'm going to give him credit for going the distance this season and pitching as much as he did. Second, Mike, you can't deny how good that first half was.
Great first half.
He was the ace of this staff, maybe not another pitching staff, but this staff in particular, it's exactly who he was. The problem is, and when it says great start, bad finish, and should have traded, we knew that fielding independent pitching, again, that's the stat that factors in everything the pitcher himself can control. That's walks, and that's home runs, and that's strikeouts, right? And it's all the things that they can control. If you removed hitting from the situation, Tyler Anderson's FIP was really, really high, and it's unfortunate because it caught up with him as the season continued. We thought he should have been traded. In fact, there were some trade comparisons we made shortly after the trade deadline that said, well, Tyler Anderson could have gone here, or he could have gone there. Why didn't he get moved? Part of it, and this is what the Angels might have you believe, is that teams just weren't interested in a Tyler Anderson because maybe they saw the same things we did. Maybe they didn't want somebody who doesn't throw a hard fastball to carry them to the postseason or pitch for them in the postseason. The thing is, the Dodgers did it with him 2 years ago, and so he was certainly there for that. But the other part of the equation is whether or not the Angels want to rely on him next season. That also makes me nervous because I think that he's going to have the same kind of issue that he had this season. Mike, is a C+ a fair grade for Tyler Anderson?
I think so. I think it actually is probably a bit generous because he did have such a great first half, but that second half, John, he was not the same pitcher. He was the pitcher that we saw last season. And I think that what our everydayers are grading him on is probably more of the first half, which is rightly deserved. If his first half continued into the second half, then I'm giving him a high B, maybe a low A. Mm-hmm. But that second half was kind of predictable. We knew that was going to happen. And Perry said that some of the trades they didn't make was because they didn't get the offers that they thought they should, and they didn't want to really deplete this roster. And I think a lot of it had to do with they knew they weren't going to be great in the second half, and they needed someone to eat some innings and give them some quality innings. Now, Tyler Anderson did give them some quality innings in the second half. However, there were really some games where he struggled very, very mightily and looked like the guy that we first got back in 2023.
Speaking of, a disappointing second half and then a disappointing season overall, Griffin Canning was scored a 1.39. That's good for a letter grade of a D. Some of the comments there: inconsistent, innings eater. And Mike, this kind of sums up a lot of the phrases that our everydayers sent with some form or fashion of move on.
Yeah.
Time to move on. Not move on, but move on, right?
Yeah. The innings eater comment is interesting because, I've been the guy that's been banging the drum on. If you have an innings eater, you also need somebody that can actually eat the innings in a consistent, effective way. And Griffin Canning just didn't do that. He had a lot of games where he gave up a lot of runs in the first couple of innings, and then everything kind of came together after he already put the Angels down 5-0, 6-0, right? And so I don't think that they're going to move on from him. I think that he will be on this roster next season, and this is his last season under contract before he is a free agent. And so I think for somebody like Griffin Canning, in order to have him be successful, if you're going to have him on this roster, I think he's got to have an opener. I think you have to have somebody that's going to start in the first inning for him, maybe even in the second inning, and then let him go until he can show you that he can be a consistent guy over the course of an entire game instead of 1 or 2 innings where he's great and then 1 or 2 innings where he's not. Unfortunately, that's been the Griffin Canning that we've seen since he's been drafted. 1 or 2 innings where he's great and 1 or 2 innings where he's not.
Yeah, I know that you brought up the opener idea, and that was actually some of the comments in our scores as well that our everydayers sent us. I'll say the same thing I said back when we talked about it. I'm tired of this babying. I'm tired of, this doing this and that and accommodating. It's like, just go out there and pitch 6-7 innings and do your job. And that's kind of where I land with Griffin Canning.
Patrick Sandoval is the next guy that our everydayers graded, a 1.22 grade, a D-. Started to turn around was one comment. Injury derailed season and head case. John, I give him an F. I think that the way that he started this season, all of the expectation of him being the ace of this staff, being the opening day starter, you and I both disagreed with that. Didn't think that he should have been that. It felt like maybe if I give him this shot in the arm, this is going to help him be the guy, right? But sometimes even if you want a guy to be the guy, and even if they want to be the guy, doesn't mean they're the guy, right? And so I think Patrick Sandoval isn't the guy. And so D-, I probably go F because he just has not been who he was a couple of years ago. And head case is a part of that. He talked about how I got to be angry on the mound because they were telling me not to be angry, and that really helps me pitch. And he had a couple of games where he did okay, but it was very similar to Reid Detmers. It was very similar to Griffin Canning, where you just didn't know what you were going to get with this guy. You thought you had something, and then he goes out on the mound, and it's 2 1/3, and he walked 6, and he threw 90 pitches, right? And then the next game is 6 innings, 1 hit, 1 run, and then we had to evaluate, who was it against? Well, that was the A's versus the Dodgers, or that was the right. We had to go through that song and dance with him as well. And so this guy is another guy that's frustrating because, one, he just hasn't been consistent since his really good season a couple of years ago. And 2, we're not going to see him in 2025. He's not going to be on this roster because of his injury.
Yeah, exactly. The thing that saves him from an F for me, and I think D- is the perfect grade, is the fact that, before he got hurt, seemed like he had figured some things out, seemed like he had been turning it around. But Mike, last year's comments said he needs a therapist. He needs a sports therapist, and here we are again with head case. So he's just not shaken that reputation. And even with this season, it's still there and still lingering for him. So it doesn't feel like you can count on him. Not to mention, like you said, he's going to be hurt next season, but it just doesn't feel like you can count on Patrick Sandoval.
And I know we've talked about this, but there is a gap between the pitchers we have and the pitchers that are coming along, right? There's a gap in their baseball mentality. It's just not there. There is something that just hasn't clicked for these guys, Canning, Sandoval, and the guy we're going to talk about right now in Reid Detmers. Our everydayers gave him a 1.13 grade, a D-. He was disappointing. A question of, is he good? Trade / change of scenery. John, the only pushback I would have for the comment on trade and change of scenery is that Reid is young. He's 25, and we have him until 2028. And so there is potential for his later years to be better. And maybe he is similar to a Joe Adell, where he needs just some extra time. The Angels threw him into the fire right away, into a playoff run or potential playoff run, trying to get Shohei and Mike Trout to the playoffs. Hey, 22-year-old Reid, can you get us there? And so maybe this offseason can be normal for him. He can start the next spring training with a good routine and be somebody that doesn't feel the weight of having to get Shohei to the playoffs. Or even this season, I think moving into this season, it was probably forgive me, I'm making excuses, but it was probably something along the lines of like, well, okay, we don't have this intensity with Shohei anymore to try to get him to the playoffs. And so that may have been a detriment to him as well, because who knows how he prepared himself? Who knows what he did? Obviously, this season, he was just so on and off that you just didn't know what you were going to get. How come he can start the season so strong and then completely fall off a cliff after that? I don't have answers for you outside of mechanics, maybe outside of what's happening inside of his head. Reid Detmers certainly doesn't have answers for you, because his answers have always been, I don't know, not sure, not quite sure what I need to do, right?
Yeah, it just seems like there's a huge disconnect between these guys who were brought in by Billy Epler, which is Canning. Sandoval was traded for, Detmers was drafted, and the guys that Perry has drafted, like a Kochanowicz, who we'll talk about later, they know what to do to get right. They know how to fix their issues.
Yeah.
They know exactly what they're working on. So I don't quite understand the lack of a connection between, man, what am I doing wrong? And how do I fix this? And for Detmers, it's all about location, isn't it, Mike? Like, it just seems like that's his biggest issue, because he's got the good stuff. That's why I like that second comment there. Is he good? Because I think it leaves a big question mark for us Angel fans is, there's good stuff there. But when you say, is he good? And you put it all together, I just don't know. It's a shame that we don't know that answer, but you're right. He is 25. They have him for a few more seasons. Mike, maybe it's worth, I know he went to AAA. Maybe it's worth some time in AA where he can, be around the Trash Pandas, who typically have a winning season and getting good spirits down there. There's some magic in Rocket City, and I think that Reid Detmers could benefit from that. If they don't decide that they absolutely need him in the rotation next season, which is what I'm afraid they're going to be doing. They're going to count on Griffin Canning and Reid Detmers, and we're kind of going to be back where we started at the beginning of this season. Hey, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Coming up on Locked On Angels, we're going to take a look at some of the bright spots in the starting rotation, including José Soriano, Jack Kochoanowicz, and so much more. We'll get into all of that coming right up.
Today's episode of Locked On Angels is brought to you by FanDuel. They're America's #1 sportsbook, and they want you to be a smart better, and you can be on their app. See, when you get a hunch in the middle of a game and you're like, I think I'm going to make a bet here, you can actually open up the app. It'll take you to a page where the live stats are right in front of you. So is the play-by-play, so much more on that page, and you can make a smart bet with all of the information in front of you, and you can win big with FanDuel, and they're going to get you started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. It's all available at FanDuel.com.
And today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. They are now an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball. It's the perfect time to get tickets on Game Time because it's the playoffs. And man, I don't know about you, but these games are intense. And I love the fact that at one point all the series were tied, and it was just incredible to watch. And Game Time can help get you there. They're obsessed with finding you ways to help you save money on tickets. You can get last-minute deals on tickets, save up to 60% for sports or even concerts, comedy, theater, so much more. They have the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. They'll pay you back plus 10%. How about that? With every purchase, you receive Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry, so you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Super fast, super easy. Download the Game Time app today. Use our promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. What time is it? It's game time.
This is the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And this is Locked On Angels. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. And you can support John and I, the Super Halo Bros, by getting you some Super Halo merch. John, I noticed that on Twitter, we got tagged by somebody in the Angels organization, somebody that I was really excited to meet. Tell us about who tagged us.
Yeah, Michael Araujo, the Angels public address announcer, who, Logan O'Hoppe. Is that a good one? Was that a pretty good one?
No. It's up. It's up. You got to go up. Logan O'Hoppe.
O'Hoppe. Yeah, we met him at the O'Hoppe All-Star Bowl, and he was repping his Super Halo Bros shirt. And if you want to get one, you can do so with the link in the episode description. It supports Mike and I directly. Super helpful. And you get to rep the Halo Bros. We would love for you to do that for us.
Johnny, let's talk about the bright spots, the good grades from the young players that maybe we didn't expect to make an impact this season. One of those players is José Soriano, supposed to be in the bullpen. And then they said, spring training, we're going to stretch him out because we need a couple of starters. And it ended up being a really brilliant decision. Soriano got a 3.19 grade from our everydayers, or at least a 3.19 score, a B grade. And some of the comments were future ace, promising, and earned his spot. Johnny, he was somebody that was a bright spot in the starting rotation, somebody that we could count on, somebody that could go 6 innings. I know he had a couple of starts where they didn't go well at the very start and was taken out early, but that's a part of the learning process of getting back into the starting rotation. But what I loved about Soriano is that it wasn't consistently over the period of the entire season, him falling out of, first inning or falling out of the second inning and giving up a lot of runs. He was able to figure some things out. Even if he had a bad first or second inning, he was able to figure some things out. Lots of strikeouts, somebody who got a lot of ground ball outs. He utilized his pitches. He was really thoughtful where he was going to put the pitch, and he got a lot of 5, 6, 7 pitch innings that I think allowed him to go further into games. Somebody that needs to do that because of his arm, had some irritation at the end of the year, and they decided that they're going to just shut him down. Probably the wisest decision the Angels made this season. Yeah,
especially with the previous 2 Tommy John surgeries that he's had. But man, I do love myself an efficient pitcher. Pitch efficiency is the one thing I love. And for him to get the ground ball outs that he did and do so well, just great to see José Soriano move from the bullpen into the starting rotation. Mike, as disappointed as we were to see somebody like I'm thinking of who went to the Braves that we wanted to bring back, and he pitched really well out of the bullpen for us. Ronaldo Lopez.
Yes.
And for him to be converted to a starter this season. We also saw that with the Giants, and it was Alex. I always do this on the show. I'm like, I know these names. But anyway, they converted him to a starter. I love that the Angels were able to convert Soriano to a starter, and it's somebody that they had in-house. I think coming into this next season, they're going to have to get creative with some sort of pitcher out there and make a tweak like they did with Sean Manaea, who I figured it out. It was the arm slot that changed things for Sean Manaea, and he went 7 scoreless against the Phillies yesterday. And he came out for the 8th, didn't, threw 3 pitches, gave up a hit and got pulled. But if they can find a guy who's been struggling and figure out the right tweak to get them to be a good starting pitcher, I think that's not the worst thing in the world. And they certainly did that well with José Soriano this season.
John, my favorite pitcher this season was Jack Kochoanowicz. He was somebody that we didn't expect to be in the starting rotation. When he came up, he had 2 really terrible starts and then went down in the minors, came back up, and then it was just quality start after quality start after quality start. So everydayers gave him a 2.92. That's a C+ grade. Some comments on Kochanowicz, ground ball king, 2025 starter, lots of promise. John, I would give Kochanowicz a B+, just simply because you saw him go, I know what I need to do. And he did it. And because he was pitching quality starts at the end of the season, it wasn't against just trash teams. John, it was 6 innings, 7 innings. And if Wash let him go, he could have gone 8 innings in some of those games, because when he got pulled, he had 70 some odd pitches, 80 some odd pitches. I think this guy is somebody who should be in that starting rotation next season. He should be somebody that we can count on, right? And unless something happens,
right?
But I think he's somebody that we should count on for 2025.
Yeah, all of these comments I agree with. Ground ball king was my favorite.
Yeah.
2025 starter. He's in my rotation, Mike, and the lots of promise. I would have given him a higher grade than a C+. I think I'm with you in the B range just because, yeah, he had those 2 bad starts, but this guy gave you quality starts, quality innings, and he did something that hasn't been done in a long time. What was it? 7 straight quality starts out of his first 9 starts or something like that. And you don't see that from Angels pitching. And that's not to say that, oh, this is something everybody does. And so, just because he did it for the Angels, his grade should be higher. No, that's quite an accomplishment in and of itself. And it hasn't been done very often. So yeah, I think he had a complete game in him had Wash let him continue to pitch in those games.
John, a guy we got a glimpse of this season that has a lot of hype behind him is Caden Dana. Everydayers gave him a 2.21 score, a C-. A couple of comments: need more time, ace potential, don't rush him. I think all of our everydayers kind of aligned with how you and I feel about Caden Dana. Great to see him, but also shut him down. Don't let him get the stink of this losing team on him. And we also don't want him to be somebody that loses his confidence. His first start was pretty great. Yeah. His next 2 were not so great. And so he's somebody that I think needs some more time to develop. I wouldn't have him in the 2025 starting rotation.
Yeah, let Reid Detmers be a cautionary tale for what happens to 20-year-olds who come up too quickly. And the fact is, with Caden Dana, he pitched more innings than he ever has in his baseball career, whether, that goes back to before pro baseball. And he did that with the Trash Pandas, and he had a great season. It's one of those things where it's like, not sure how much he has left to prove, but I think another season where he gets brought up, I don't know, maybe halfway through next year, and he's somebody you want to give an extended look to, I could see that happening. But again, I don't think there's any need to rush him, and it would be a shame if they decided to do that.
Yeah, Sam Aldegheri is the last name in the hopeful, the potential guys.
Aldegheri. Yes, I'm doing it for myself. I keep saying Aldegheri.
Yeah. 2.12 score, a C-. Lots of potential, needs more time, future rotation piece. Johnny, I think he's somebody that I would highly consider for the starting rotation in 2025 over Reid Detmers, over Griffin Canning, because he was somebody that showed me what those pitchers hadn't shown me in a long time. And that was, he knew what he was doing on the mound. He knew what he needed to do to adjust and to fix some things. Blisters got in the way. It wasn't like he was terrible and teams were figuring him out. It was really the blister was the issue for him. And I just like how he's built. And so I think I would highly consider this guy in my starting rotation in 2025.
Yeah, I like that move. And I don't disagree with that. I think it could be a lot of fun to see him in the starting rotation, put him toward the back of the rotation, because he's got the nasty stuff. He's a stuff pitcher in the sense that he's deceptive. He's that kind of pitcher who can make adjustments. And I think he showed that on the mound this season. Unfortunate that the blisters got in the way. And also, I know he struggled to get out of that first inning against the Mariners in his debut, but that error kept him in there. Yep. And he struggled to get through that and get through the air. But every time he came out after that, it was like, okay, there's the guy that people were hyped on. So yeah, I would give him a chance. He's not somebody I'm worried about rushing like a Caden Dana. Yeah. It's somebody that I think, this is a guy that you could probably trust to give you some good innings, and you're not compromising, your number one prospect like Caden Dana in order to do so. So yeah, I think I'm with you. I think Sam Aldegheri gets a spot in my rotation for 2025.
Today's show is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah, you can explore those U.S. cities that you've always wanted to learn more about with Booking.com. They have hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, so much more. You just might find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival city during the postseason. Maybe it's time to taste test your baseball competition's stadium cuisine. And with Booking.com, you can find the right stadium stay that's just right for you. With Booking.com's wide variety of choice across the United States, you can go incognito to your baseball rival city. No matter what team you're rooting for this postseason, Booking.com can make you a fan of any U.S. city. Booking.com, Booking.yeah.
Mike, the starting pitchers that we're getting into for our last segment are kind of the bummers. Like, things didn't really work out. They were disappointing, or it just didn't go the way that the Angels and fans had hoped for or planned. So let's start with Chase Silseth, who we didn't see a lot of this season.
Right.
Our everydayers gave him a 1.28 out of 4. That's good for a grade of a D-. The top comment was something related to, hey, get healthy, he was injured, that sort of thing. Mike, I thought these were interesting. Unknown and untested came up a lot for Chase Silseth. Now, if we talk about the trajectory of his season, he was in the starting rotation, got hurt, I think, after his second start, was out for a long time, went back to AAA, was in that rotation. They moved him to the bullpen. Things were not going well for him in AAA. So it seems like whatever injury he dealt with, he had been dealing with all season long. The Angels say he's going to be ready for spring training, which is great news. Mike, unknown, untested, does this season kind of erase what we saw at the end of 2023 when we were pretty excited about Chase Silseth? What do you say?
No, not at all. But I do agree with those comments of unknown and untested because we haven't seen it over a long period of time. But I think the guy that we saw at the end of 23 is the guy that is still in there, and a healthy Chase Silseth, I honestly would put him ahead of Griffin Canning in this starting rotation.
Oh, yeah.
Simply because he has that starter's mentality. There's something about him that Detmers and Canning don't have. And I'm a big fan of Chase Silseth. And so I think he's somebody that, depending on what they do this offseason, he's somebody that you can slot into the rotation and give him a shot. John, him is, and along with like Aldegheri and perhaps even considering George Clausen, who hasn't made his major league debut with the Angels, they have some really fine young pitching. And also with Clausen and Silseth, I think they've got some swing and miss potential there at the bottom of this rotation with Tyler Anderson, Soriano. Let's say it's Aldegheri, Silseth, and Clausen. I know that's probably a leap because those are young guys, but that's a good-looking starting rotation. Young, inexperienced, but a good-looking starting rotation. I'd love to see a Chase Silseth healthy season, 28 starts, 30 starts for this guy. And I think that he'll put up the numbers that he was putting up in a small sample size from prior years.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how he pitches deep into games. Remember, he would run out of gas. You'd see his fastball velo kind of tick down, tick down, tick down. I imagine there's going to need to be some building back up. Of course, he'll work over the off season, but as far as starting the season with the Angels and maybe in the rotation, that's one thing I'm going to be looking out for.
Davis Daniel, a Locked On Hall of Famer. We love this guy.
That's right.
He got a 1.40 score, a D. Some of the comments were one good start, two hittable, figured out. Johnny, he feels like I'm going to fill in. I'm going to be a long reliever. Starter didn't go long. Something happened. That's what Davis Daniel kind of feels like right now because that's all that he's produced, right? He did have that really great start against the Detroit Tigers. But then after that, it felt like he didn't have that same mentality or that same stuff when he was out on the mound.
Yeah, when he spoke to us last winter, one of the things that we were really excited about was the fact that it seemed like he really understood what he wanted to accomplish on the mound. A lot of that was pitch tunneling. Hey, if I throw my slider and it ends up here, I'm going to throw my fastball where my slider ended up so that I can fool some guys. And you know what he did in that first Tiger start? He did exactly that. Yeah. And that's how he was able to go 8 innings into that game and do what he did. But then we just didn't see it again. And that was unfortunate because, we're big fans. And so we have a heart for Davis Daniel because he shared some of his story and his path to the majors with us and wanted to, compete for a rotation spot. Mike, I think that he is good pitching depth, and you go to him when you have injuries. Yeah. You go to him when you need him. And I hope going into next season that he's able to accomplish a lot more of what he set out to do. This is a guy who gets it, but it's one thing to get it and then put it all together on the mound. Yeah. And I just think that's what's missing for him right now.
Yeah. Two guys that were starting rotation depth. The first guy was Zach Plesac, got a 0.82 score, got an F. A couple of comments. Move on. Not good. Would rather have Dan, his dad, Dan Plesac, pitched for the Brewers, is on the MLB Network as well. Zach was just a piece to have on this team just in case. And unfortunately, with the Angels, there's a lot of just in case. And we saw Zach Plesac had one good start, and then it was nothing after that.
Yeah, you know what? Coming from the Guardians and the way things ended there, I thought it was a good depth signing, and I know that he struggled before they signed him, and that's a reason why he was no longer with the Guardians. But it was like, hey, if you can get something right with that guy, Plesac to me is the perfect guy that the Angels need to go out and get, but then help them get right.
Yeah.
And they didn't help him get right. And I think that was the missing ingredient. I think Dan is his uncle, actually.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. But either way, would rather have Dan Plesac that made me laugh.
Yeah. Last name, Johnny Cueto. Of course, he came at the last second at the end of the season. One of those guys that they just threw on the roster. 1.13 grade, D-. Time to retire, wasted innings. And that was fun. Johnny Cueto was just a body to fill some innings. He is the epitome of we just need to get these innings out of the way.
Yeah.
And that's when they went and got him, because they really were struggling to find starters at the end of the year.
Johnny Cueto, we've been clamoring for him for years. And, 10 years ago, it would have been great, Mike.
Yep.
But,
Yep.
not in 2024. That's not when they needed Johnny Cueto. I love the last comment there. Well, that was fun, because it's like, hey, at least you got to see him in a uniform. I don't know why they gave him 36, Weaver's number. They got no respect for uniform numbers in that organization. It drives me absolutely insane. But yeah, Johnny Cueto, flash in the pan. What do you get? 2 starts, 3 starts, I think.
3.
Yeah, 3 starts.
Look.
And they weren't terrible starts, but
sure.
Yeah, it was like, could you use those starts for somebody else, or are you just trying to get to the finish line, and this is how we're limping toward that finish line?
Hey, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Now for your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast with our friend Sully. He's going to walk with you all the way through to the Fall Classic and even do some off-season work with you as well. He is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and he's a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.
Hey, be sure you give us a follow on Twitter at Locked On Angels and at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. Whether you're watching or listening, get on over to today's show on YouTube. Get in the comment section. It's the best way to interact with Mike and I there. Mike, what do we have on deck for tomorrow's show?
We're grading the relief pitchers, or you're grading the relief pitchers, and we're sharing your grades and our thoughts tomorrow on Locked On Angels.
All right. There's a lot of relief. Give me some relief, man, because there's a lot of pitchers to go through. So we'll do a little speed run, I think, tomorrow on Locked On Angels. We'll focus on the important ones. Until then, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Thanks for being here with us, everybody, and we'll see you back here on Thursday.
Dan Plesac, his cousin, uncle, Lemon's kid.